Hello guys, I recently received this email asking for a junior code review, and I realized for quite a long time I haven't done any junior code reviews, and it was pretty popular a few months ago. So if you go to my Laravel Daily YouTube channel, among popular uploads, number 2 is junior code review with astonishing 137k views. But for a while I haven't done any code reviews. I was focused on other topics, and let's make an exception here and make a review for this person for the repository of recipe management. It's a pretty simple code from junior developer, and I will have quite a few tips how to improve that. First, the installation of the code, and first rule, if you give the code to anyone on your team or publicly, it should work. The installation should work. So I cloned the repository. I've run composer install. It works. But if I run php artisan migrate fresh because I have something in the database seed, I have an error. And now I have to dig deeper. Why is it not working? Some foreign key constraint and stuff like that. I almost feel like kind of a disrespect from that person, like they're giving me the code and then it's my problem to make it work. But okay, I've spent the time and I found that there's a folder called modify migration for some reason that has 2 migrations for some reason in a specified folder, although they should be in the main folder. So let's drag them here, refactor, and then likes here into the migration. And let's delete the modify migration table. So that was step 1, why it failed, and then there will be step 2. So for now, let's refresh seed. It's still an error, but on a different migration, so the comments migration. And the reason for that error is the foreign key field integer versus big integer. So see in the create comments table, which actually throws an error, there's a foreign key for recipe ID with integer field. And recipe ID comes from recipes table, where the ID of recipes is table ID, and by default it is big integer, not integer. So from that mismatch we have a migration error. And by the way, this error is not really clear or readable, and it doesn't say where to fix what. It doesn't say anything about integer or big integer. It's just general SQL error, cannot add foreign key. But the fix is to have big integer instead of integer, also for other foreign keys as well, for user ID, and also in other migrations I saw the same thing. So big integer, and on likes also big integer. Okay, now if we refresh again, now it is successful. So step number 1 is installation of the repository, which wasn't that smooth, but I made it work. Okay, so now we launched the project visually successfully, and probably we can log in. But what are the credentials? Probably they should be in some kind of README file. Nope, on GitHub there's no README file. That's another feeling of kind of a disrespect. Maybe I'm phrasing it in a wrong way. I don't want to disrespect that person who wrote the code, but generally, if you give the code to someone else, please make sure that they don't have to spend extra time to even launch your code or figure out how to log in or something like that. Put in the default credentials or default users or something like that. And to be honest, there is a seed for database seeders, user seeds. So there are 10 users seeded automatically, which is okay. But what are their passwords? How do I log in with them? If we go to factories, for example, there is a user factory, and what is the password? Okay, it is password. So probably I need to go to the database, get the email of some person, and then try to log in with password. Okay, I'm in. But why is it not in README or anywhere else? And even then, new recipe, for example, I want to add a new recipe and I want to select the category. There are no categories. How do I add the category? Apparently it can be done only by admin user. But admin user isn't seeded. There is no admin user here. So see how many problems I encounter, and that's what I wanted to emphasize. Not because the code is bad, but even the setup for new employees, for new teammates, for new reviewers is pretty complicated. So to solve that, I need to, again, one of the possible actions, I need to go to the database, setup is admin 1 for my own user, and then if I refresh, I get the menu categories, and now I can finally start working with the project. The project itself is a few CRUDs, so create category, for example, something something, we submit, then we go to the home page, we can create a new recipe. I will use fake filler Chrome extension to add something here and there. We submit, and there is a recipe. Then we can read more about that recipe, add a comment, and every comment may have likes or dislikes. So that is the essence of the project. That's all you need to know visually. Now let's dive into the code. First thing I always look at in a new project, it's routes file, so routes web. And what do we have here? Let's close the sidebar for now. It is using an older version of the syntax of the controllers, which is with add symbol, which was the original from Laravel 7. In Laravel 8 it changed, so to make it work, for those of you who maybe don't know, in the route service provider, there's a setting called namespace, so if you have that uncommented, then you can use that syntax. But to be honest, I already got used over the time that Laravel 8 is up, I got used to that syntax of user controller and show user comments like this. Or in fact, user controller class, it should be here. Sorry, user controller class, like this. It looks longer on the surface, but then it is clickable and I can immediately land in the controller when I need that. So I would personally vote for this syntax, but that's a personal preference. Especially if you started before Laravel 8 on Laravel 7 or earlier, you may be used to that syntax and that is okay, it is working. But what I don't like immediately in this case is inconsistency in method names. So show user comments is the method in camel case, and change password, update password is in the snake case. Why? If you want the correct answer of what it should be, according to PSR standards, it should be camel case. And I will link the documentation of PSR standards in the description of this video. But either way, this is not bad. The bad is the inconsistency. So if you have both, then code becomes messy. So even if you don't follow PSR standard, which I don't recommend, but if you do, for whatever reason, at least stay consistent. Next, if we scroll down, there's get before resources, and this review is not only about bad things, I also will say good things. So this is a typical thing which I see other people make mistake in. So if they have route resource and then some separate /recipe/ something, so if you put these underneath the resource, it will throw an error, or in fact it won't match those because it will conflict with recipes show. So a good practice is to put any additional resources, additional routes before the route resource. So that's a good part. Then let's scroll down, and this part is pretty questionable in my opinion. So group for route resource except show, and then out of that group the same controller with only show. So I think the logic here is to have category controller for admin to manage the categories, and then only the show method would be available to other users, not admin. And this works, but I would generally separate the controllers. So if you have a route for general user to show something, then it should be user category controller. If there's admin functionality, it should be in admin category controller. That's again my personal preference and personal opinion, but it should be, I think, in some kind of subfolder with namespace like user category controller, and here you would have admin category controller. And then having route resource with just only method, I don't think that's a typical way, so I would do just get categories category here probably, and then category controller show with name of whatever name it needs to be. So it's not actually route resource, it's single route get. And then final thing in this route that I've noticed, likes and unlikes for the comments. And generally, if we follow the comment like and unlike, it creates likes table and unlikes table separately. Again, that works, but I would vote for one table of, for example, likes, and then one of the field will be boolean or tiny integer of 1 or -1, something like that. And then you would be able to calculate likes or unlikes from one database table with the same single structure. And there are also packages for that. For example, I have Googled and found Laravel Love, which was introduced back in 2018, and I think there were at least a few more packages which allow you to just liked by, likes count, and provide you basically with full functionality of likes and unlikes on whatever model you choose. So I would vote for that one. So that's probably it about routes. What I do like though is the separation of groups of routes. It's not even route group. Maybe it's possible to introduce route groups, but not necessarily. What I do like is the visual separation with the comments. So users, recipes, admins, categories, and stuff like that. That is a good thing. Okay, next feature I want to show is the route model binding with slugs as route key. So for example, if you go to recipe, the URL is /recipes/slug. And I do like how it is implemented here. So there is route resource for recipes. And if we go to recipe or controller, again, I cannot click it directly because the routes are not in Laravel 8 style, but I can go through that controller and go to show recipe. And in the recipe model, there's get route key name. So for those of you who don't know, you can change the slug of route model binding. So there is no find or fail here. It happens automatically with route model binding here. And that slug is set also in the model. In the set title attribute, that is an interesting case. I don't really advise to do that, and I'm not a fan of doing that, is using two attributes inside of one mutator attribute. So I think that Laravel feature was created to set one attribute, so transform the title to first letter of capital case, and that's good, but the slug should be set automatically in somewhere different place because it's not a set slug attribute. And I have a separate video pretty recent on how to set the default value for some invisible field like slug or user ID in that video case, and I will link that video in the description below. But in this case, it works. The slug is set automatically here and then is serving as route model binding key. And finally, let's discuss one of the controllers, probably the main controller where the action is happening, in recipe controller. And first thing I want to mention here is I personally don't like the middlewares in the controller. While it works, and it is possible, but personally I prefer to know the middlewares in the routes. So here it should be not only prefix for admin, but also which middleware is used. And here for all the non-public routes, it should be probably these ones all grouped with middleware of auth instead of having that here in the constructor of controller. It's mostly because it becomes a hidden logic. So in the routes, I don't see which routes are public or for admin. Maybe I can guess it from the prefix, but then I need to check in 2 different or even 3 different places who has access to what in this project. So middleware in routes is my personal preference. Then in the recipe controller, we have this recipe, new recipe. Why is it needed? Let's search for this recipe here. And in the show of the recipe, we have format ingredients. And what does it return if we go to format ingredients? It is returning ingredients. Okay, it is comma separated ingredients. So it's transforming that into array. Okay, but that's probably not the way how you should do that. Format ingredients should be an attribute. Again, if you use in the recipe set title attribute, in a similar way you should do public function set, for example, ingredients array as a separate attribute. It shouldn't be the same as ingredients attribute, and then return that. So return this ingredients, return, it's not in, so it's this ingredients, this. Something like that. And then whenever you need that, you use ingredients underscore array as a property of that recipe model. So you don't need to do this, and you don't need to define a private or protected property with new recipe. That is kind of an over-engineering. Okay, in the index, it all looks cool, getting the recipes, getting the categories, nothing really I can comment here. Create form is also cool. With the store, there's some logic to add an image. And this is, I really like auth user recipes create. It's a short way, so to not set user ID. It uses has many relationship to auth use recipes. Cool, I like that. Probably this one may be transformed into don't repeat yourself logic of, for example, recipe this. So we create the recipe anyway, whether the image exists or not. So that is the condition. So we create the recipe. Auth. And then if the recipe has an image, then we do recipe update, because we do have already the recipe record with just an image, something like that. So then the controller becomes shorter and it doesn't repeat the same code. I hope I didn't break anything, but you see the logic. There was a duplicated code and I extracted that before the if statement. And that's probably all I can say about this repository. Everything useful, everything else is more like details here and there which are personal preference. I hope that code review was useful for the person themselves and for you guys. And if you want more junior code reviews, I probably will get back to those because they are really popular on this channel. So you can send me your code to review. I don't promise anything yet. It will depend on how much free time I have and how your code is actually useful to others. But you can send me your code to review. I may choose your code. Email is povilas@laraveldaily.com. So send me the link to that repository. Tell me your story, what is the project, and also invite me to the GitHub repository. Username is povilascorp. And see you guys in other review videos on this channel. Subscribe to get daily videos.